this whole project has taken, kind of from start to finish, about a year. So the first thing that we did when we started out was kind of sketched out this concept on paper of what the progression of the video would be. Visualize them starting out on Rainbow Road, because that's already in space, and then moving through Tatooine, Hoth, and the Death Star, so you have a variety of Star Wars environments. We could showcase a few different things from the universe. Originally, we were going to kind of try and do this split screen, like 4-player multiplayer view, and I'm really glad we didn't do that, because that just would have been nuts. So the next stage that we went through was drawing the storyboards. The storyboards took a huge amount of time. I can't even remember exactly when they were finished, but it was months of time. I ended up just going through and sketching out kind of each panel of what we wanted to see. So we finished these storyboards, and Casen, Mike, and I, we discussed them and talked about things that we did and didn't like. And then what we did was we put together an animatic. Down to see the Mario Kart start line at Rainbow Road. That animatic was really useful for seeing like about how long we thought this video was going to end up being. Out into hyperspace, but Bowser Jr., who's left behind. So we ended up sharing this with a few people so they could give us some feedback. But this is really, really rough, but it's basically what you ended up seeing, right? What ended up actually happening. He gains control, but he's passed up by everyone. And there were honestly some ideas that we had in the storyboard that we felt like would work really well, and they ended up not working well, and we had to create extra shots. There's a few places where you can see, like, towards the end there, and I just wrote it in red, we need an extra shot here, so that this, see, originally Bowser flying off was going to transition straight into just Mario shooting the fireballs, which then was going to transition straight into them flying away from the Death Star and it blowing up. That didn't cut very well. That was going way too fast. Very proud of the fact that we got everything in this video to scale. So looking up, like on the Star Wars encyclopedias and everything, exactly how long each of the ships are and how big they are, and so they're all to scale. So it was tricky trying to get the characters and the ships to be to scale, but I think it all ended up working out really well. So each shot, we would start with a template like this. Now, we had to build the terrain, and for that we used something called View. View is great for generating mountain landscapes and all kinds of things, and so what we ended up with was, for example, for Tatooine, I can show you here, because they're moving so fast, we had to scale up the environment so that they could be covering tons of ground and have that really quick feel to it, but not run into the end of the terrain. And so you can see here, Tatooine is made up of a few different blocks that could be rearranged and kind of matched together to create different types of terrain. So we did the same thing with Hoth. Hoth is a mountain landscape that kind of actually has a lot of pockets in it. So really that one was just one giant terrain, but we could just dive into a pocket of these mountains so that you wouldn't see the edge of where the terrain was ending. So throughout the video, there's a number of shots where they're approaching a planet. And so what we ended up deciding was for this video, we were going to do matte paintings for the planets that they approached. Specifically though, we did matte paintings stitching together NASA satellite photographs that we had found going through NASA's archives. And so we would create larger looking planets from smaller pieces of actual photographs from space. And I feel like the results we got from that were a lot higher quality than things we've tried to do in the past showing planets. I'll tell you a secret. We were originally going to do this video in Element 3D in After Effects. So if any of you are familiar with Element 3D, it renders very quickly. The new version of Element and simulate some more advanced lighting techniques. It was going to cut down a lot on render times and animation times because we kind of figured out ways to work with nulls, and we're very familiar with animating in After Effects, not as much 3ds Max. Element ended up having a really hard time with what we were trying to do. For example, Bowser here, he's in Vader's TIE Fighter, and that had a very fine detail, is the grid on the panels around his ship. And Element 3D did not like that. It would freak out. It didn't know how to alias and smooth out those squares to make it look correct. And so even in a shot where it wasn't moving from frame to frame, it would kind of be treating it a little bit differently. We actually animated a few shots in Element before we decided to abandon it because it just wasn't going to work for what we needed. So then we started looking into maybe using 3ds Max and vray to animate this. And we did a few little tests, and we really, really liked the look of how the renders were coming out for vray.
One of the things that we like to do in a lot of our CG work is to add camera shake. And a lot of times our camera shake ends up being taking a 2D layer and just kind of moving it or doing it in After Effects. Sometimes we do it by hand. And when you do that, it can look fine if you're doing a short rumble, but we're going to have a lot of camera shake happening throughout this entire video. And we wanted to make sure that we weren't just taking the 2D image and kind of shaking it around like that we actually used our 3D camera and were able to get the rotation and the tilt and a lot of the different things that cameras do other than just the 2D translation. And so if you'll watch a shot like this right here, you can't tell that they're going that fast other than the fact that the camera's shaking, right? And so the camera shake helps to sell how quickly things are moving, and also that there's a lot of friction and turbulence in the atmosphere. But another way that we use the camera shake is if you look over here on this orthographic view, that we keyframed all of the ships. Every ship here is, slightly rotating. And the way we did that in 3ds Max, if I go select the camera here, is that we used something called fractal noise. Here it is. So you have this little kind of graph right here. And this is showing exactly how the camera is shaking. And I can change the random seed here if I want a different look to my shake, if I want it to bob up and down in like bigger motions. And I can change the frequency if I want it to be crazy. Let's see how this one looks. Anyways, we didn't really want it that bad, but point is, in 3ds Max, you have a lot of control over exactly how you want the camera to shake and the ships that we use to kind of bob and to move organically so that we're not keyframing every single rotation. This render right here, this shot, took about, 90 hours to render the first time I did it. And for what it is, it's like 100 frames. It shouldn't have taken that long. And so what we ended up doing, rendering them in 2 separate passes and then combining them later. And then having to add the star field even after that. Usually we'll render the star field with everything else, but it ended up taking a long time as well. So we did the star field, the trench, and then just the ships. And the trench I was able to get away rendering it just a medium quality because it's flying by, it's really blurry, and I'll bet you nobody noticed, but then these ships here had to be rendered at a high quality. But with the trench moving so fast and with new geometry constantly coming in view of the camera, it was just taking forever. And so by isolating it, we were able to actually save, like 3 days each time I'd render this. It only took about maybe 15 hours combined between the trench and the ships in front. So that helped a ton. You should do that. We had a lot of flickering happening in this shot, and you can see these parts where I've had to mask out the engine. These are places where if I go ahead and turn the eyeball off, you'll be able to notice that you can see it especially here, there's all these black dots and weird things that kind of keep appearing. So if I come back into here, you'll see them pretty well here. They kind of flash on for a second. We couldn't really figure out why it was happening other than the fact that there's just a ton of light bouncing and there's a lot of rays to calculate. So what we did to fix that was come on and freeze frame one of the better, clear, non-motion blurred frames, mask it out, and track this entire engine in Mocha And so by tracking in Mocha, it enabled us to take the exact planar data that was being shown here and overlay our own image on top of it. So in this case, I just took a freeze frame of probably frame 1, I can't remember which frame, and was able to just put it there, and Mocha did a great job of tracking and showing me this is where the plane is. And once I did that, there you go, it's fixed. And so we're able to get away with it here, and you can see the shot now as I play through it. There's no flickering. And before, when there is flickering. We had to do this for, I want to say, about half the shots in this video. We had some flickering problems that we had to go in and fix manually, but either way, it took a lot longer than we expected.
Sound design on a scene like this, where it's mostly just, well, it's a racing sequence, but you know, it translates, the same principles translate over to like car chases in like Hollywood movies. They're difficult and they present interesting challenges because everything is very, very loud during these sequences. And what can happen when everything's at a high volume and everything's very intense is that you can begin to lose the power and the meaning behind certain sounds, like car engines, for instance, or in this case, the ship engines. When you're hearing everything at a very high volume for a sustained period of time, you become acclimated to that, and that becomes kind of the new normal. Let me give you an example of what I mean by this. So, since this is happening in the vacuum of space, in space, everything's silent. There is no sound, right? But when you're doing this big sequence, and you have lasers, and you have ships, and you have all these really loud noises, you can kind of begin to forget what it would sound like if these things weren't there at all. If there were no ships, if there were no lasers, what would it sound like in that environment? So what you want to do is remind the viewer of how powerful these things are by taking them away and reminding them this is what it's like without these big powerful things there. And then you put them back in again to create the contrast in that volume level. And I did that a lot here in order to retain the power and the meaning in those sounds, so that you can feel like, oh, you're reminded, oh, how powerful that is, right? So I did that quite a bit in this video. So, you know, we start off on kind of a long shot. At first it's totally silent after the music fanfare, and then we come down and we just hear a little bit in the distance. We really bring up the volume, both in the music flare and in the sound there, to indicate how powerful this stuff is. And then you notice there, when his ship breaks down and all the ships have hit light speed, we bring that volume level back down. We really remind you again what it's like without all of these things there. And then when he takes off again, you feel the power of his ship. Does that make sense? So you want to really try to do that. You want to create that contrast in the sound levels in order to have these loud sounds mean something to the viewer, so that they feel like, whoa, like that was powerful, that punched me in the gut. You won't get that effect if the whole video is at that volume level the whole time. So I did that quite a bit throughout this. Another good example of that is, you know, they're in the warp tunnel here, and they're hitting each other. And then when they come out of the warp, you really get that sense of like, okay, these things are really powerful. So that was a big challenge for me in being able to balance that and create that contrast throughout the video. A lot of sounds in here were created from a vast number, like an array of different libraries. I'll have a lot of people ask me the question, you know, oh, what library did you find that sound in, you know, for any one of our videos that we make? And my answer to that is, that sound doesn't exist in a library. It's like 5 or 6 sounds layered together. So a lot of people who watch our channel are likely visual effects artists themselves. And what you understand as a visual effects artist is that you can't just throw one effect onto a layer of footage and call it good, you know, just your muzzle flash or whatever. It takes more than that. It takes layering effects to get it to look, you know, realistic, to get it to fit in the scene. And the same can be said for sound design. I mean, there are a lot of libraries that you can buy where they'll design sounds for you, but what you probably don't realize is that they've done all of that layering and then they've presented this sound for you. In order to actually create a unique sound, you have to do a little bit of engineering, which entails, just like visual effects, layering sound effects together, or layering sound files like samples, and then applying effects to each of those to kind of create something. One example I can share with you where I did this here was for all the warp, like when they go into light speed and come out of light speed. These are a little bit simpler in terms of, like, you know, sounds created from scratch. But essentially, as you can see here, I have like several sounds layered over the top of each other. So I'll play it back as it actually plays in the video. Let me turn the music off real quick so you can just hear what this sounds like. So what we have, and let me single these. So the very first sound that we have is, honestly, it's just like a punch, just like a gut punch. And that's kind of like the root of the sound. Like, that's what the sound's based on. It's just this powerful punch into light speed. And then on top of that, we are adding in a few different, like, energy pulse effects, or energy discharges, which again are layered together to create something unique and then have effects kind of applied on them. But I'll go ahead and single those, and then you can see what those sound like without the punch. And then we have kind of a low rumble underneath all of that. And then you combine that with the ship itself, so you have like the X-Wing flyby sound effect, which is here on 13, and a little bit of a bass rise on audio 12. All together, you end up getting something like this. So that other sound effect there, that's like an engine loop that there's kind of like a stunted sort of effect put on it. So it's like so it comes like in and out of like the volume is dipping back and forth. And that's what they do a lot for like pod racing in the prequel Star Wars trilogy. So we have a little bit of that going on top of this bass rise, a couple energy discharges, an energy build, the X-Wing flyby, and a punch. And what you end up with is this. Then you combine that with all the other ships that have unique versions of those things as well. Now, everything combined together gives you this. So, if you're a visual effects artist and you're, you know, trying to get into doing a little bit of sound for your film, it's the same principle. You gotta layer sound effects together to get something unique. You can't just throw one. You're not just gonna find that perfect warp sound effect online and throw that in there. That's not how it works. You gotta layer them together. The first thing you want to do when scoring music for a film is keyframe all of your tempo changes. If you've ever worked on, say, like a music video before, you'll often already have a piece of music written, and you edit your footage to that music, to the beat of that music. You usually do cuts on downbeats, you know, in order to keep the video feel like it's flowing with the music. You don't have that luxury in film scoring. You have to go the other way around. So the director will send you the edited footage, and you now have to make music that fits all those cuts. So in order to do that, you have to keyframe tempo changes. So here I'll go ahead and have the click track on so you can hear the click track, and every one of those downbeats you see will often come on points of impact in the video. When something really dramatic happens, like a ship crashes into another one, or when you have a cut. And so when you want to have the music, come in with something dramatic at the same time, again, to kind of build the right feeling in the viewer, you got to make sure that your downbeats are happening at those times. And as I play this here, you can look at these here and see how they kind of match up with all the beats of the video. So you get the idea. On all those important moments of impact or on cuts for dramatic effect, you got to make sure that your tempo the downbeat is lying right on when that happens. So that's the first step. After that, then you have to start the composing process, which is, again, a pretty challenging thing. Initially, when I was setting out to write the music for this, the idea was, Landon wanted me to basically take a Mario Kart theme and then but play it back with instrumentation of like a Star Wars piece, like the full orchestra. And the challenge here was trying to find a way to mesh those two pieces of music, those two genres of music, really, into one. I think that I found sort of like varied success. There were some themes that I was able to do that with, and others that I wasn't able to do that with. So this piece here, obviously the very beginning, the Star Wars fanfare, if that's the word for it, is from Star Wars, and then you have this part which is the racing fanfare for Mario Kart 64 before a race begins. So those are literally, sorry, I'll try to talk not while it's playing. Those are literally just from those things, obviously. But it's when it comes to the actual racing music. So this first piece was a kind of a combination of some of like the chord progression and root portions of the Battle of Endor that I mixed in with the melody from the Mario circuit of Mario Kart 64. The dun 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 dun. Right? Now that seems to be the only theme that I could find of all Mario Kart songs that works within a minor scale or like a minor key piece of music. So this first part worked for the most part. So you also can see there how the downbeats of those music all fit with important, it's awesome. That's why you keyframe the tempo changes. But so that worked really well. Then we got into the second portion. I felt like I had this idea as they came out of the warp tunnel, because I also did the sound design. I knew how much contrast I wanted to create with that moment, where everything's very loud and then we take it all away. And so I didn't want to do anything with the music that would distract from the impact of that sound design choice. So I wanted to use a choir, which is, kind of just subtly in the background of that in order to retain the meaning and the power of the ship engines. So I had an idea to use the Phantom Menace, I think it's called Duel of Fates theme there, because they used the choir for that. That's kind of like the featured part of that song. So kind of go straight into the dun, 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 which is also iconic. But then trying to work a Mario Kart song into that was not working. I tried one, I think it was the Mario Circuit song from the Wii version of Mario Kart, and it just, the major scale was really clashing. It didn't feel right. So what we decided to do from there was to switch off. So we would do a Star Wars theme, and then a Mario Kart theme, and then a Star Wars theme, and then a Mario Kart theme. And that's kind of the way we went for the rest of it. So this part playing through was just that Phantom Menace Dual Fates. And then when we get to the next section, which is back in the Warp Tunnel again, because we have Luigi here, who's basically all the comic relief in the video. He has the funniest voice clips because he's always like down on himself and he's like not very confident. So I decided to do a remix of the Mario Circuit theme again from the Super Nintendo version of Mario Kart. And what Nintendo has been doing with a lot of remixes of some of those older songs these days, they do kind of like a jazz band, like a live jazz band kind of feel to it. So that was my initial idea, was let's try and make it sound like what would they do if Nintendo were to remix this song for a Mario Kart game. So that was kind of the thought behind this, and the fact that it feels so different from the orchestral pieces ended up working out because it's a comical sort of scene. It's actually my favorite piece of music throughout this entire video. I just think the instruments worked really well together and created a really good sound for it, but that's what's going on here. So you get the idea there. Then we come out of warp again into the Death Star sequence here, and originally I was just going to do mostly Battle of, is it Yavin? Yavin is the one from the first movie, right? And Endor is the third movie. So Battle of Yavin, mostly that music there, but for the part where it comes in and looks at the Death Star, Landon was looking for something that introduces the Death Star as a location. So the Imperial March is kind of worked into this, along with those flaring trumpets to kind of introduce that part. And then here, we want to break away from the music because, again, the sound design here is emphasizing this slow motion moment where Luigi sort of taunts Mario here. And then we break out into a lot of that Yavin music throughout the rest. So I've kind of mixed together pieces of that because obviously our sequence here is not nearly as long as that scene is in the movie. So I've taken like pieces from different places during that sequence, the Death Star sequence in A New Hope, and kind of mixed them together with rising cymbals. So whenever I do transitions into another piece of the music, it helps to have like a rising cymbal that comes into the downbeat to kind of like transition into that, and it doesn't feel awkward. So you'll notice that here. You see how the music changed there from one thing to another? I'm able to accomplish that with cymbal work. That's the best way to make those transitions without them feeling abrupt. See how that worked? So then we did that all the way through the end, and then I also worked in. So when the Millennium Falcon comes in, because I have again him getting hit by the red shell here on a downbeat, and I was like, what should I do to fill in that space? We're gonna have the Millennium Falcon come in. That's the next shot. And it's like the Millennium Falcon doesn't really have a theme in Star Wars, and Han Solo doesn't really have a theme in Star Wars either. It's just Princess Leia. But I felt like that worked because it's Peach inside of the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon. So I did a little bit of a Leia theme here to kind of introduce her before going back to the explosion sequence. So. explosion, and then on the very final title card, it's the main theme from Super Mario Kart, another remix, jazzy kind of remix of that. So yeah, that was all the thought process behind the music on this one. Hopefully everything fits and you guys like it and flows with the video. That's the goal.